So good morning and welcome to CSIS. My name is Sujay Shivakumar. I'm a senior fellow here at CSIS and I direct the Renewing American Innovation Program here. It's a pleasure, of course, to convene this event on meeting the U.S. defense imperative, challenges and opportunities in the development of the U.S. defense industrial base. Particularly appropriate, I think, to have convened this event to mark Veterans Day this week. This event is in collaboration between our program here at CSIS on Renewing American Innovation at the Economic and Security and Technology Division at CSIS and the CSIS Center for the Industrial Base, which is a part of our sister division in the Defense and Security Department. So for today, we have been working with NIICA, which is the National Institute for Industry and Career Advancement in programming today's event. NIICA, for those of you who may not know, is a national industry intermediary that builds the semiconductor and advanced manufacturing workforce, working closely with industry leaders and governments to meet our nation's current and future workforce needs. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Mike Russo, who's the president of NIICA, for his remarks, and then that'll be followed with a panel discussion with some experts. Thank you. Mike?
Well, thank you, Sujay, and thanks everyone for joining us here in person today as well as virtually. The partnership that we've had with the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the American Innovation Program goes back a little ways. I think this is our third event, and I just want to say that the dialogue that is fostered and facilitated by that program is extremely valuable because maintaining U.S. innovation is very, very important to not only our national security but our global competitiveness. So thanks once again for your collaboration. And also the industrial-based policy group, very important if you think about the supply chain needed for not only long-term, meeting the defense imperative longer term, but midterm, but also our rapid response in the event that we have to marshal a supply chain. I think the work that is being advanced in that program as well is very, very important. At the Institute, we are our sole mission is to focus on the talent pipeline to meet the imperative, not only defense, but national security, but also global competitiveness. So that is what we do. So we are advancing a strategy and throughout the nation to really develop that workforce. One of the fundamental pillars is to ensure that individuals can leverage skills regardless of where they've acquired them to enter into and advance in related careers. So whether it's the trades or whether it's actually manufacturing or anything to do with tech, advanced manufacturing, but also building systems and applications that are important, again, to national security and global competitiveness. So if you think about the discussion today, focused on the talent pipeline for the industrial base, as well as the maritime base, and if you think about what some of the programs that we've been charged to deliver on just in the next decade, it's really mind-boggling. So we have some experts here today that can talk a little bit about what is the imperative between now and 2030? And how are we situated with the current state of the talent pipeline? What's being done to address gaps? And what should we do? So really, at the end of today's discussion, we hope that there's a better sense of not only situational awareness, if you will, but also what can be done and how to connect with entities that maybe can help to move that ball forward. So the one thing I would like to mention is we have a survey at the end of the program. It's very important to take some time out. It's very simple, very quick, but we'd like to collect some data at the end of the program. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sujay, who introduced me. I'm going to hand the baton right back, who's our moderator today. So Dr. Shivakumar, he's the director for the Renewing American Innovation Program and a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He brings over 2 decades of experience studying U.S. competitiveness and innovation policy. Before joining CSIS, he directed the Innovation Policy Forum at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, where he led major studies on advanced manufacturing, small business growth, workforce development, and entrepreneurship. Dr. Shivakumar has testified before U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and has been quoted in, in the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. He holds a doctorate in economics from George Mason University and has co-authored works with Nobel laureate Elinor Ostrom and on the political economy of development and innovation. With that, I'd like to just introduce Sujay to moderate today's panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for that generous introduction. It's now my pleasure to introduce the panel here today. To my immediate right is Melinda Woods, who is the chair of the NIICA Board of Directors and former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense on supply chain readiness and a former director, Title III Defense Production Act at the U.S. Department of Defense. To her right is Jerry McGinn, my colleague here at CSIS, who directs the Center for the Industrial Base. To his right is Clay Nagel, Senior Director at the National Center for Skill-Based Learning at NIICA. And I think on the screen above us is Matt Bogosian, who's the Executive Director of the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, AMCC. Well, first of all, welcome to CSIS. Thank you so much for joining us on this, really important topic. When we talk about innovation, which is the key word these days, it all comes down ultimately to the workforce. But they are we often struggle with how do we define it, and also to have a sort of sense of where we are, how urgent is the problem, and ultimately, why does it matter? So as we look, perhaps the first set of questions to all of you or any of you, as we look ahead to the next 5 years or so, what is the Department of Defense calling the industrial base to deliver across land, sea, air, and other emerging domains? And how does the current workforce realities really measure up to that mandate? Jerry, would you like to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sujay, thanks very much for the introductions, and it's great to be here with you and Melinda and Clay and Mr. Bogosian and the audience. I think Secretary Hegseth laid it out in his speech on Friday that DoD wants to do a lot. They want to buy a lot of different things, a lot of different capabilities, ranging from aircraft carriers and bombers to lots of drones, unmanned systems, and the like. And they want to do it yesterday. So having the workforce to do that for the commercial high-tech capabilities, some of these advanced welding, these other microelectronics, is significant. And this has been a kind of chronic challenge for the industrial base. So I think there's a lot that the department is looking to do. They laid out some of that in their strategy, including workforce. And now it's the time for action.
Melinda, what do you think? Can you sort of describe what the defense workforce looks like today? Where are we strong? Where are the needs, the shortfalls, and the technical and production roles that underpin our readiness? What are the challenges today?
Sure. I'm going to be specific and talk about the industrial base, because I think there is also a conversation around the federal workforce, and so I want to be clear when we're talking. So talking about the industrial workforce, we have known for quite a long time. In fact, I was a part of a decade ago Better Buying Power workforce development efforts, because we knew that we were really in a dire situation around workforce. And that was, in that case, also considering federal. So we've known for quite a long time, in particular in certain areas that are related to some of the weapons programs and the major defense acquisition programs that Jerry mentioned, that there are specific skills that we are really, really in a bad place. So anything related to the skilled trades, any of the welding, any of the machining, any of the things that we depend on for aircraft, for vessel, for all of the major defense weapon systems, platforms, we have been struggling for quite a long time in those areas. So what I like to also then connect to that is the work I did in cybersecurity. So what you end up having is a technical workforce at the application layer that needs to be built up, right? So we have very good programs in the United States for degree programs. We don't have as consistent standard and well supported programs at the technical work area. And so that's known, and that is a part of what NIICA is addressing. It's expanding the workforce to bring more folks in who can be trained, and particularly trained on the job. So I'll talk about that as we get into this too. And we saw that in IT, we saw that in cyber, we know that also is the case in advanced manufacturing. So those are needs that have been known for a long time. They are not getting better. We've known for a long time, whether it was the silver tsunami that we talked about years ago, or what I'm going to call the tech appeal for younger folks. It is, we have to figure out how to reach the up and coming, how to grow the K-12, how to bridge the gap between the degree program and what we need today and on-the-job training, and that's a part of what NIICA is doing.
So just to follow up, Melinda, there's sort of this, in the public's mind, workforce issue. There's the high skilled part of it, and then there's what's called the skilled technical workforce part of it. Can you sort of describe what the need is in each side of that equation and what the mix is in terms of what is actually required for the defense industrial base?
I love that you pointed that out because I, in fact, have a call into a colleague on the research and engineering side of DoD that largely works with the high degree workforce. And largely, of course, works on research and engineering. And so it is very, very important to our innovation base, to our tech base, to also have very strong research efforts, which largely tend to employ mostly high degree. So that's also very important. We cannot maintain leadership if we do not maintain leadership in our research efforts, in our development efforts. It is also very important on the applied side that we have people on the ground doing the work. And so that is how those two things come together. I think we are, if you were to look at the solicitations that are out on the street, some of the conversations that have been had by the leadership of the department, I think there are needs in both areas, frankly. But we know for a fact that even, it's been studied by business schools. When I was in business school, I was shocked to hear that we knew as a country that we did not have the population that we needed to fill the jobs that we knew we were going to have. And we were talking about the centers to get these workforce assets. I was really shocked that that was known. So what we have to now do is figure out how to energize and how to motivate and how to capitalize on our K-12 systems to build pipelines out right into the tech base as well. And there's still options, of course, to go into the high-skilled areas.
So Matt, thanks for joining us remotely, but let me reverse the question. What's the risk if we don't do something?
Oh my gosh, Sujay, thanks for the introduction, and great to be with all of you. Sorry I can't be there in person. I want to just echo, Jerry and Melinda's comments right off the bat. Jerry, you're saying this is a chronic challenge. Melinda, we're in a dire situation. This is nothing new. The risk is very high. I mean, we need to produce priority products in this country, and we've got to wake up and do more than admire the problem. I know Mike Russo, shout out to you, talking about how we need to get to a solution set. The risk is high. We need to have, a battle plan for attacking it. from the top down and the bottom up, and it's going to include a whole of society approach, and that's something the AMCC has been urging action to do. We have an opportunity, Sujay, to all chime in on what ought to be the new national strategy for advanced manufacturing, which gets at strengthening the defense industrial base and the maritime industrial base. And so that's something I hope we can talk about here on the panel. But so those are my opening comments, you guys, and excited about this conversation.
Clay, just to set this stage, can you give us sort of some texture on where the shortfalls are and how urgent some of these are?
Yeah, so as everyone said, we've been admiring the problem for some time, right? We need to get the solutions. I think some of the gaps are looking at all of the components that could be in the talent pipeline, and people are dabbling in that, but not really pulling together a full, holistic approach to how to get as many people into that talent pipeline as is humanly possible, especially on the skilled trade side, right? And on that application piece that Melinda was talking about. At the university level, sure, there's always a need to do more and scale programs, but I think those are fairly well defined. It's really just lining those things up with the need that is now, right? On the skilled trades application side, there's some more building that needs to be done, right? And there's really good models for how to do that. But again, it just has not been applied correctly in this particular realm.
So speaking of applications, Melinda, you've basically worked across almost every layer of the defense supply chain. And given now your role on the board of NIICA, how do you see NIICA's model of industry-aligned collaboration helping to close this gap between mission requirements and the workforce that that's needed to deliver them?
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on Clay, or to elevate what Clay is saying, the models that work in the spaces that we need them have to be elevated. So a couple things. One, when I was working in cyber, there was a big effort to quantify the defense industrial base. And there was this number thrown out of 300,000 companies, which might be surprising to some people, right? A large number of those companies are small, which also might be surprising. What we also know, you started out talking about innovation, is that a big part of how innovation gets brought into the industrial base is through smalls. A big part of innovation and a big part of smalls being able to operate is also growing the workforce. They oftentimes are bringing in new talent. And so there is a large business, there's absolutely a space for having structure and having programmatic kind of mainstay. And there's absolutely a space to bringing in those who are on the ground doing the work. I would argue that is exactly the space where NIICA is. We are actually a very good combination of having what the mission state, the mission of the department oftentimes needs, which is expertise, longevity, structure. We have the best experts in the workforce space at NIICA, but there's then the need to be able to be nimble, small, on the ground, and do the work. That's also where we really, really shine. And so bringing a capability like the NIICA to the table, to be able to get on the ground, do the work, to be a part of that big ecosystem of hundreds of thousands of players. I spoke recently to one of the main players, big name players, and they just frankly said, we're not really in the business of doing things like curriculum alignment or showing companies how to stand up an apprenticeship program. We're here to do the connections. So it's room for everyone, but it's important that you get the folks who are on the ground doing the work, really expanding the industrial base, operating, and that's what NIICA's doing.
Well, Jerry, there's a problem, there's a solution, but sometimes the two don't attach to each other. So what do you think are the most pressing structural or policy barriers that are sort of keeping the solution from meeting the problem?
Yeah, no, I think that's the heart of it. And I'm not a workforce development expert. I defer to colleagues from NIICA and other places and Melinda on that. But I think this is fundamentally a problem with the kind of the nature of the market. All right, what we have in our world is a set of kind of a government customer, different government customers, and then you have companies that look to support, and so the government sets the market and the government regulates the market. So ultimately, the industrial base is going to respond to those market incentives. So if we want a stronger workforce, what the companies are going to respond to what the opportunities are. So if you want a robust workforce, the companies have to have a steady demand signal of funding that they're able to then budget and plan for. When you have, thankfully today we have the government back in order. But when we have lack of stability in government budgets, this is a chronic problem. The lack of kind of clear investment strategies that are sustained over time. Companies, it's really hard for them to plan to uncertainty. So I think fundamentally what has to start first and foremost is stability and clarity on transparency on the government side. To signal to industry, and I think I'm very confident in the ability of industry to respond with whatever initiatives there. I think there's definitely more work to be done on the trades, but I think it starts with how the government, as the buyer in most cases, has to signal to industry.
So Matt, you worked at the intersection of manufacturing policy and economic development. How can these strategic investments in the defense workforce drive both innovation and long-term pipeline resilience? Is it through partnerships, training, apprenticeships, all of the above?
Yeah, that's a big question, Sujay. I want to follow Jerry's comment in answering it. And get specific. So let's say within the defense industrial base, let's talk maritime industrial base. The best evidence that we have is that, for a successful maritime on the national defense side, it's going to be hard to have that succeed just with government customers. So folks might be familiar with the dual use economy. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to, make ships in this country that are good for both civilian and military purposes. And we don't have a strategy for doing that. There's one underway, and the MARAD, the Department of Transportation, Maritime Administration, has partnered with the American Bureau of Shipping to create this U.S. Center for Maritime Innovation. Which is really working to create some technical working groups. AMCC has partnered with the National Association of Manufacturers to have a maritime ecosystem exchange. But Melinda introduced the term ecosystem approach, and that's really what we need to do. We can't. We're in this competition with dictators and thieves, authoritarians around the world who can just dictate what their supply chains do. And we are kind of relying on this kind of 20th century race to the bottom model of one region pitting itself against another American region, where we have to come together as an entire national ecosystem and take that strategic approach in an ecosystem way. And so we can't just leave it to the private sector, I guess is my point. We've got to lean in with national policy, encourage our state governments and local governments to lean in, and the nonprofit and private sector folks to lean in. And that starts with a national strategy. And that's why I was bringing up this request for information that's open till December 12th. If somebody's tuning into this or in the room wondering what they can do, I think chiming in on what ought to be the new national strategy for advanced manufacturing is an opportunity right now. You can just Google RFI National Strategy for Advanced Manufacturing and chime in to by December 12th on that. It's going to take an ecosystem approach, Sujay, and we don't have it right now. Folks are starting to get into this zone, but it's slow in coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just also just add to the point that Matt just made and Jerry just made, as we're thinking about all those things, particularly the demand signal, I love what you said there, Jerry, we have to also recognize the workforce as a part of the strategic deterrence infrastructure. And it has to be a real demand signal, if you will, a real endorsement of understanding there. As well in the policies. That's going to be pretty important. The workforce, it's going to be great to have all the machines and tools, but not so great to have people who can operate them.
In fact, that's when I was testifying before the Joint Economic Committee on Congress earlier this year. Senator Wickett actually asked this question, and I pointed out that the workforce is as much as part of our infrastructure as power or ports or other types of infrastructure. But Clay, to pick up on the point earlier, I mean, it takes an ecosystem, but there are also positive lessons. You've actually done it, with your role at Global Foundries and as the global lead for technical training. What lessons can you pull out from that experience that can scale up and inform a national debate?
Sure. So there's a few things. First from the standpoint, how do you start really building a strategy that's understandable when you're going to go out? Because part of the problem that you have is a marketing problem. Like, how do you convince people that they're going to go into these skilled trades, right? So if you start thinking about, where do we begin? First thing is you've got to prioritize micro-credentialing, stackable micro-credentials that break down complex tasks that aren't easy to market into bite-sized chunks that then can be packaged into, easy to attain qualifications that are directly aligned with not only the entry-level jobs that you're talking about, but the laddered up jobs from there. Because what you really want to be able to do is show very quickly the clear pathway. There's a career pathway here. It's not just I'm hiring into a job to be a welder, right? There's a career pathway. So when you're doing that, that's the first part of the marketing plan. Second piece is, how do you do that and do it in a really holistic way? Embrace apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships, because it truly is a holistic talent strategy, right? You're marrying the on-the-job training, which is very specific, with the related technical instruction that's needed, so that individuals are learning exactly what they need to do the job. And it's different than the degree side. And I'm not trying to, bash the higher degree side of it by any means. I think it also puts somebody in a position where, with that related technical instruction, it actually gives them a boost toward that if they choose to go down that path as a career progression, right? So that's a really good thing. And if you're embracing really the apprenticeships, work with intermediaries like NIICA, because we know how to build and scale those, right? So that's super important. The last piece is you've got to build real sustainable partnerships with the education providers. So from a skilled trades perspective, you're looking at, community colleges, high schools, career and technical education programs, and building the connections between those that show the progression into those career pathways, right? By investing in those entities, you can go in and influence curriculum. You can really build those partnerships to the point where you're building a talent pipeline over a long term. So if you start thinking about, kind of what's the sum of all of this, it's really got to get away from reactive hiring and trying to figure out how to fix the problem by, I got to hire a bunch of people and train them, and how do I do that? The shift needs to be to truly sustainable talent creation by building those pathways from the CT, high school, community college, right up through the way the entire training is built within the industrial base.
Melinda, we keep hearing this term apprenticeships, and it's also something that's picked up in the political discourse. It seems like let's just do apprenticeships and solve the whole problem. As you know, it's much more complicated than that. So, and at the same time, NIICA does have a registered apprenticeship program. It kind of describe a little bit more what apprenticeship means and why it's not just something that is sort of a slogan that can be applied across the board.
Yeah, I think what Clay just said it best. I was like, oh, I like that. Literally keeping it simple so people understand what is the value. Related technical instruction married with relevant on-the-job training. I am a trained electrical engineer. I went into semiconductor design. I did not have any experience in that. Had I have had experience in the fab before now, I did also do some internships, so that helped. And this is what we're talking about with apprenticeship. That would just only enhance the way that I would be able to perform on the job. So I will step out on a limb and say that the bedrock of what America has always been able to claim in its leadership is our ability to perform in applied situations. So I went to school in France. And I remember, again, being shocked that people would say, America, they do things the best. Why? Because they know how to do it in practice. We're great theorists. And these are, I knew nothing, I wasn't working with DOD at all. So this is not biased conversation. We're great theorists. But America, they know how to apply the knowledge they get. And so these situations, internships, registered apprenticeships, that bridge the gap between theory and on-the-job training that allow you to be effective on the job in applied situations are absolutely critical. So that is a big part of what NIICA brings, working directly with industry, knowing exactly what the requirements are for the job, having a system, an infrastructure that allows for taking those requirements and translating those for a learner that directly then points to what curriculum, what courses you need to take that then directly allow you to be able to go hit the ground running in a job, and the employer saying, this is what works for me. You have to employ systems like that if you want to be able to build out the surge capacity.
So there's sort of two aspects to this market, right? I mean, you have students and workers who have to have some knowledge of what courses to take, what credentials to pick up, what experiences to garner as a way of working their way up towards what industry requires. You also have the problem of industry trying to find, especially in the short run, people with the requisite skills. So how do you match those two, and how do you get that? I mean, we heard a little bit about the ladder up, but how does the top down process of trying to recruit people today?
Yeah, I'm going to start, and then I want Clay to jump in. The piece around having strong relationships with employers and understanding their requirements, having their trust, having their buy-in, and sharing, this is what we need, being able to break down those job descriptions and those needs, the career laddering that may already exist in the company, into components that we then can put into a system, which we have, the National Talent Hub, and marry that up with the related technical instruction and instruction from the educators, and allow for that pathway to be very clear and easy is really the way to do that. So that system is pretty critical. The process and being able to break down the industry into its competencies is also critical. All work that NIICA has done, and maintaining that relationship, and frankly, hand-holding even the companies as they build these programs for them to be able to do this at scale and effectively is also critical. But I also want to pass it over to Clay.
Yeah, so, to Melinda's point, I'm sure we've all seen lots of job descriptions, and it'll, what qualifications do you need? They're typically not designed to be a skill profile for a job. And there's a reason for that. A skill profile for a job, if you put that up online trying to attract somebody, for the lack of a better term, it's not very sexy.
It's not
right?
attractive.
So what we can do, and we've done a lot of this, is we're expert at going in and breaking down that job description into a true skill profile for the job. And then likewise, you don't just do one, you do the laddered up positions from there so that you can show the employer, where are the similarities and how does it ladder from a similar skill or same skill, but higher proficiency level as you go up the ladder. And what does that mean? And then tying that to education providers in that area so you can show the resources that are available including the internal training and how that aligns, so that you can show how does somebody progress from A to B to C to D. And then working with the employer to start talking about how do you truly do skill-based hiring, right? Where you can, I don't want to say ignore other signals, but the skills somebody has, regardless of where they achieved and got those skills from, regardless of where that is, whether it's a community college or a CTE program, if it's been vetted, if they have the skills, we can hire that person. So it broadens your talent pipeline in relation to the typical way hiring is done off of those older, kind of a job description approach.
Jerry, in our division on economic security, the workforce imperative is, for competitiveness, for economic growth is clear, and our program has been making that case. Can you make the case from the perspective of national security, and what policymakers and the Defense Department or the War Department can do to actually push the need and the resources in this direction? Because there is a gap, there is an urgency, there are some solutions. How do we make this? What can we do to make the connections happen?
Yeah, no, I think Melinda pointed to it, and it's something when we worked in the government together we talked about. I mean, the workforce is part of the industrial base. It is, and if the industrial base is critical for national security, the industrial base is therefore the workforce is therefore critical for national security, because you need the workforce to develop, produce, sustain, and advise the government officials on the systems and capabilities they needed for victory. So that workforce is therefore critical to national security. It's critical for competitiveness, but I think, and you saw this in the Secretary's strategy he laid out in his speech last week, where he talked to, he did not say, you company's bad, workforce, bunch of bureaucrats. He said, we are all on the same team. We need all of us to succeed. And that kind of approach is the kind of approach the government needs to take to lay out the national security imperative, and then use some of the programs such as you all have outlined to help fill those gaps. And I think one of the things that I'll just close with is that a lot of these areas where the workforce challenges are not necessarily defense unique or military unique. They cut across. The semiconductors is overwhelmingly commercial business, right? So, but it has needs, and so we're dealing with the same sorts of issues, but there's lots of different ways to make the case of the importance of the workforce.
So back to you, Matt. AMCC has helped connect regional manufacturing ecosystems and align them across shared workforce priorities. Our system is inherently federal, so how can those same regional community-based models be applied to help the defense sector build a stronger, more coordinated talent pipeline?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I want to answer it in a way that responds to Clay's point about marketing. Clay, you talked about marketing, how that's important. Like, to get the talent pipeline, we've got to get more people into the funnel, into the pipeline. And, we don't, it seems like we're shy about making this, a whole of nation approach and calling on the patriotism of our people to get into making these priority products to protect America. And I think that's a big opportunity, but we don't have the structures really necessary in this country to enable that. I mean, it's great that we have more and more intermediaries to work to help bridge those gaps, but we don't have the structures in place that have the federal support, but let the regional communities come together and build the public, private, and nonprofit sector trust that's necessary. Every region's different. Every Melinda was talking about the 300,000 manufacturers across the country. Most of them are small and medium-sized operations, and they're busy. They're not applying very quickly the new technologies necessary in the defense industrial base. And so they need help if we have some kind of regional collaboration centers that are supported across the country. That could be a step forward. Maybe we have a manufacturing core of some sort, where folks can have national service. These are some of the big ideas that we need to engender together, in conversation in a democratic process. But we can't, back to Mike's point about, admiring the problem. Speed and scale matters here, and this is not the 20th century where we're top of the economic heap across the world. We're in a competitive situation, and we may need to rapidly respond, to national security threats, and we're not yet in a position to do that.
So, Jerry, perhaps back to you. This week we had Veterans Day, and there are a number of servicemen and women who leave service, and they have very important skills that they have developed during service. How important is it, both for recruitment and their service during their time in our armed forces, to have a system that picks up on that and amplifies that in their future careers?
Oh, very, very much so, because there's a lot of kind of recognition of the valor of the service of vets, and the need for them to be part of the workforce going forward. But a lot of times vets struggle with transition, and that's why there's efforts such as there's this Skills Bridge program, which allows folks that are retiring to work in industry as they're retiring. Because what happens often is that the specific work experience does not translate necessarily to business is direct as some would like, and so but helping the military officials and officers and enlisted when they retire, helping them bridge that gap and find out how to become marketable for these companies, and then for companies how to kind of how to translate those military skills to their needs. That is a really, really important effort.
So, it's a challenge. We basically have not paid attention to this important workforce infrastructure in our nation's productive mechanism for past 2 or 3 decades, and we are suddenly faced with having to accelerate this. We have an urgency, we have a problem, and we have solutions. So recognizing all these 3 elements. What's the next step? If you can chart out, say, over the next 12 months or so, actions that need to be taken either at the policy level or the implementation level, and maybe just start with you, Melinda, and sort of go around the panel here.
Thanks for putting me on the hot seat first. So at the policy level, I think it is imperative that it is explicit, the needs related to workforce development, that it be made a priority by that demand signal that Jerry mentioned. And I really want to follow up with Matt on this manufacturing core. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and so I'm from the auto era. And so manufacturing is a part of my blood. It's something that Mike and I also talk about, right? The manufacturing, and how I really landed in industrial policy in that work. So big ideas to the point that was made that highlight and elevate the issue that we have in workforce from a policy perspective, I think would be a great next step. And then ensuring that there are funding mechanisms and programmatic incentives to allow for the folks who are working in this space, the NIICAs of the world, to be able to work together across there are multiple programs with regional nodes and regional hubs and various things where there's not a lot of coordination, there's not a lot of incentive to coordinate either. And so I think having a bit of that as well, and those like us, NIICA, we're going to be doing the work. We're going to be doing the work regardless. So having some support, having a platform, to elevate and collaborate and work with others to do that work, those are the next steps.
Yeah.
I go back to what I said at the beginning. I think it's the job of the government or the Department of War, Department of Defense, whatever you want to call it, to set the market. And that demand signal is what will drive workforce. So if the government focuses on that and getting that clarity and transparency, and creating incentives, the market's going to respond. The NIICAs of the world are going to do their work, and companies will build their workforce. But that's the big first step, is the government to do its job.
I make it a policy not to discuss policy.
Yeah.
That's not my thing. But from the standpoint of, let's assume we get some clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all right, now we've got clarity. From an implementation perspective, time to stop admiring the problem. Let's target a particular area, whatever that would be in the industrial base. Let's go show that these things can be pulled together and solutions are actually there, and prove case on it, and then roll it out across, widely, I guess is the best way to put it. Time to stop admiring the problem.
Well said. Matt?
Yeah, concur with my colleagues there, and that's the practical things right now. I raised this new national strategy for advanced manufacturing that's supposed to come out next year. In the meantime, though, we need to build trust. So people should have input on that new national strategy, and they can do that as an individual, as organizations. Every public, private, nonprofit level can chime in on that. That's one way to manifest change, and working not just at the federal government level, but a lot of state governments and other regional collaborations are working together to strengthen their ecosystem of support around the defense industrial base. The American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, AMCC, is the nation's manufacturing community of practice, designated by the Department of Commerce. And there's all these economic development initiatives bottom up, where they're trying to build trust. And Melinda, you were talking about the critical point of trust in the ecosystem. That just doesn't happen overnight, right? We've got to work together in these regions, bottom up, at the same time as we get better direction top down and better incentives to coordinate. We don't have those incentives to coordinate. We need to demand that we get them. And folks can lean in, whoever's listening to this, you can lean into this work. We need you to lean into it. We need more people into the funnel of the talent pipeline, and intermediaries, like NIICA, and thought leaders like CSIS are critical to keep raising that point, so we get more bottom up, top down activation. Yeah.
Thanks. So, as a nation, we are facing a critical moment. We need to reboot our manufacturing prowess to be competitive as a nation. We need to. There's certainly a national security imperative that Jerry has outlined, and we have solutions. And I think the last round of comments really highlights the importance of prioritizing this, creating the emphasis, creating the conversations, the buzz around the need to actually get started. And there's an expression that a colleague of mine likes to say, which is, there are not 37 solutions. You have something on the shelf, so I think the time to reinvent the wheel is over. Take the solutions that are available. NIICA has really been pioneering in developing those, and to start implementing them tomorrow, if possible. So I just wanted to once again thank the audience for their patience and interest in listening to us, but also thank you to Matt, thank you Clay, thank you Jerry, and thank you Melinda. Sorry.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.